Do you ever use a Kelvin meter?
Nah.
No, why not?
They're not accurate, for one thing.
No?
And I prefer to look at what's happening, to make a creative judgment based on my color sense at the time.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it's a feeling, not
Yeah.
It's interesting because I've been flirting with colour meters since this has been around.
Yeah.
But it's just more shit to carry around, right?
Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, part of the problem, part of the beautiful thing about these cameras is they have everything in them. You don't need a meter anymore because they have a waveform in them.
Yeah.
You don't need a color temperature meter because you can play with the way the color looks. And after that's a question of mixing colors. I shot a little clip. We had a car drive in, and I had a strip of LEDs along the top, and then a little cluster of LEDs in the dash. And one was blue, and the other one was tungsten. And someone saw the picture, because I just we're lighting this car. And they said, "Oh my God, the color temperatures are different. Why would you do that?" And I said, "Well, why not? It's interesting, because the lower one is just going to be a little cooler, and then there'll be this little band of warmth up top." I said, "Life's like that, you don't have boring old color temperatures." And yet I was the one that used to go into a building and have them change 500 fluorescents because I was like worried about the color temperature, for God's sake. I haven't done that in 5-10 years, maybe ever since 24. We just said, hey, I can do that. So labor intensive. Did the boys really want to go in there for 8 hours and change fluorescents and then change them back again? So they're warm white. Okay, let's see what the camera does with warm white. Dial it out. Looks pretty good to me. And so, if we put a little bit of, we use warm whites in our Kino flows, then we're matching, right? Yeah, okay.
So a lot of your work is based on real world, real life.
Yeah, because we go into big locations and they want to shoot right away. And the biggest challenge for me, certainly on 24, was being able to go out on the street at night and see enough of the world that we could fly a helicopter in, put a camera in the helicopter, look down with a night light chasing a car, see the car, and then be on the ground looking at the car, tilt up to the helicopter, tag the helicopter, come back to the car again and pan him into a parking lot at night. You can't light that kind of thing. So we just said, okay, it's sodium look, great, it's the Valley, LA, or wherever it was supposed to be. And we just went with it. And the film I could take to 1000 ISO. But what's so amazing about these guys, the Alexa and the Red and this, they all allow you to go much beyond that in ISO. And the Red, I took comfortable up to about 2000 ISO. But after that, you would get fixed pattern noise, which is like tractor kind of vertical lines. You can read them quite clearly in the blacks. The Alexa doesn't do that really, even at 3600. It's quite noisy, but it doesn't go into the pattern, the fixed pattern. And this one, the 20,000, doesn't go into the fixed pattern either. And this one's just a whole other bunch faster than either of the other two. I could only go to about 2000 on the Alexa, but the Alexa had a more satisfying look, and it also had a high dynamic range. But this camera is an unknown to me, and the DPs that have shot with it, Felix Akala shot at 16,000 ISO. These are a whole bunch of stops more than we've been used to working at. And remarkably now, you don't need lights. There's no question you can shoot anywhere. Now, can you control the lighting under those conditions? No, not necessarily. But what's cool about it is if you want a lot of light, you maybe use 4 1x1 LEDs, and you can blast a small space into being like a science fiction overlight, just with 4 LEDs running on battery power. It's just crazy. It's crazy.
And previously, LEDs, let's be honest, weren't really quite enough, were they, to light stuff?
No, I had light panels. I've had them for almost 10 years. From the moment they came out, I got hold of them, did some advertising for the guys, and was shooting a movie, Molly, an American, it was one of the doll movies in Toronto, and that was the first time I used them. And then they kind of lost interest in them because they were a little fiddly and they didn't really do enough. We were always Kinos. They weren't quite bright enough to do anything.
They hadn't quite got the horsepower, had they?
Plus, you needed to modify them a little bit. You want to put honeycombs on them, or you put a chimera. Now they make a chimera for it. Oh, yeah. But with the Alexa, suddenly, oh my God, these movies, they've taken over. I don't need... I used to have these lights that David St. Orange designed for me, these beautiful little, very flat, skinny, round lamp. No housing. It was just a base to keep the sockets. And I had 4 200-watt lamps in it. They were used in pepper bulbs. They're basically peppers. I don't remember the number. And then there were 4 pin sockets for the chimera, the excess. So we used excess chimeras. We had grids on them, honeycombs. And then you could dial these up and down with 200. So you get up to 800 watts. Well, as soon as we started shooting with the Alexa, we realized it was too much power. So we went back to 100-watt bulbs. And I was working on a church one night, and we put a 100-watt bulb through a diffusion filter on a chimera and threw it 100 feet across a church with a grid on it, and made a difference, a big difference on a wall on the other side. And I'm like, oh my God, this is a whole new world. And this will take that same thing to 4 more stops at least, possibly 5 more stops. Big difference. I mean, it's staggering.
Well, I mean, we've all had a bit of a play with this. We went down Billingsgate Market the other day and we had a lot of fun with it. What do you think the implications are for lighting for TV, for the TV industry?
The industry, I'm already getting feedback from, for instance, I'm doing a series Dallas in Dallas, and the Genny op, who drove a generator, owned the truck and ran the generator, I got feedback that he was pissed off about this camera, because we're no longer carrying his generator. I don't need it. The biggest light I have is an 1800-watt HMI made by Arri, and it'll plug into a light socket in the wall. I don't need to have 4-aught and distro cable and all the stuff that used to go on around us. And you're always getting rid of it because it's in the frame, so it's like manpower issues and so on. It's all that negative stuff that you have to do. Yeah. What's exciting about these is an individual who buys this camera can walk out of a store, you put the mic on, it'll feed there, although I'm a firm believer that you need a separate sound system. You need a recordist who's responsible for the sound. It's as equally important as it is to the picture. Good sound, it can ruin a picture so fast you have no idea. So take note that this would be the configuration I'd be interested in, and I ideally would like to plug in through some kind of cage system a separate viewfinder that came to about here, so that when the camera sat on my shoulder it was a little different. My lens of choice right now is an Optimo 15 to 40, 45 to 120, and they make a 28 to 76. They're 3:1 lenses that are around 2.6, brilliantly sharp and gorgeously physically good for handheld. They're comfortable, they're easy to move, they take Prestons or any kind of follow focus unit for remote focus, and it's a very comfortable camera. Kitted out with that lens, this thing wouldn't top 10 pounds. And at that point, for an operator to be able to handheld the camera for 12 hours on a day is a piece of cake. Also, this camera, interesting enough, I was watching you shooting in Billingsgate in the market. It didn't seem to be obtrusive to me in a way that a fixed Betacam style camera, and especially if you take the mic off and you reduce that down. And my kids did a mockumentary, and they got a really beautiful kit that was a body mic that ran 12 hours of recording of broadcast quality with timecode with a mic they taped to their chest. And then they used the mic on the camera, a very small one, just so that they'd have the ability to mix the two signals.
Sync, yeah.
They sunk it and pluralized. They didn't have to slate. So they were completely incognito in a crowd.
It's great.
They look like they're shooting stills, and yet you're doing broadcast quality dialogue. And I wish I could remember the guy's name. Newlyweds is his latest film. I think he made it for $20,000. And they went into B&H in New York City, and they bought a 5D and 3 lenses and one of the separate audio recorders and a mic. They walked out an hour later and started shooting their movie, and 19 days later they were done. or 15 days later, they maybe
Amazing.
12. It was like a short amount of time.
Yeah.
And this is the camera for people who don't necessarily need makeup, don't need hair, don't need wardrobe. Actors are going to come with their own clothes, they're going to do their own makeup, they're going to present themselves ready to roll. They've got their lines down, and you're in a public space and you're enacting some kind of dialogue. And this is actually something you could get away with. That if you don't put a matte box on it, this looks like a fat Hasselblad.
Mm-hmm.
It could
Does
be
rather, doesn't
construed as a still camera. And for a while, I think people are going to be able to shoot with this, just as they shot with this guy, the 5D. And interestingly, this is only about twice as thick.
Yeah.
It's in the vertical. You can see how there's just a little bit more, but that doubling of the electronics in here takes you a long way further from where this camera was. This is a true professional, handles all the questions you might have to ask, and has a superb picture quality, which was demonstrated. I was able to go to the launch screening on this giant screen at Paramount, and the picture quality was spectacular. There's no reason. I had no qualms about saying this was my movie and that was my finished print, I would be a very happy guy. I can't see any reason. And for the money that you're talking about and the investment and the actual hardware, you're on CF cards, you go to your laptop, to your MacBook or whatever, and you're cutting and you're finishing and you're doing your color on it and you're doing your audio on it and the whole 9 yards. It's an amazing new world. This was a challenge to use. And only people who were, I suppose, professionals really got the best out of this. But I think this camera will shoot for itself. I mean, anyone can buy this camera and be doing highly credible work immediately without any knowledge, really. Is that a little scary? I think it is in some ways.
Yeah.
But
still all manual though, Crucial. You've really got to know. You've got to know your stuff.
Yeah.
To really get the best out of this camera.
But that is a key thing
I think that's
about this
wonderful.
that's beautiful is it's all manual.
I love that.
And you
That was
have
one of
to-
the great things
Yeah.
for me.
yeah.
That it was, auto nothing, it's manual everything.
What's
it's
also
about
surprising, because I challenged it in the beginning, was the idea that this was first off available not as a PO mount, but as an EOS mount. But the more I see people using it, and Vincent putting on a 800 mil or 600 mil, all this pre-existing lensing, which you don't have to worry about. You can get it from rental houses, they're all out there.
Yeah.
You've got every lens you could possibly imagine, from this all the way to this, that great 8 to 15 mil, which I use almost every day for some kind of shot. And it just plugs in and works. Talks to it, the display's there, tells you where it's at, what its ISO is, everything about it.
Yeah.
The only thing I need for the kinds of work that I do is I need a follow focus guy who we're tracking the lens and he has to know what he's doing. And generally my guys they'll work blind, but they like to work with a feed, which you can get out of here, going into a monitor and then looping it through to the director's monitor. So we hardwire everything we shoot on Shameless and Dallas. Everything's hardwired. Surprisingly, although the camera is moving a lot, we have a cable guy who just handles the mechanics of keeping that out of people's feet.
Have you seen the really cool thing it does with the Wi-Fi adapter?
No.
Where
I haven't.
you can plug a Wi-Fi module into it, and you can see the feed on your iPad. And if you leave the camera lens on autofocus, though it doesn't autofocus, you can adjust the focus from your iPad.
Wow.
So
well,
with
the thing is, the biggest problem we found so far with the Cube and so on is we had to give it up because the delay was so great that the audio was delayed. You can take care of that, but then the director can't cue anybody because everybody's mouths are moving out of sync to what he's hearing. So that's the big challenge right now. The box unit, BOXX, is superb, but it's heavy and it's a full broadcast unit. Does a great job, but it's also about 12 grand a channel, so it's a lot of money. It's more than the camera probably will wind up being for a lot of people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What were you going to say, Lan? You were going to say something?
I forget.
It's that time that ladies and
It's that
gentlemen.
time of night. It's 2012.
It's just
Yeah.
2012,
To be an
January the
amazing
1st,
year.
and it's 25 to 3. So
Oh wow. That's
we're slightly bleary-eyed, just
Yeah.
having a little dram before we go to bed. A question I want to ask, without naming names, some people have said it's not 4K output, it's a disaster. What's your opinion on that, Rodney? Truthfully, what's your opinion?
98% of the output that people view at home is 2K, or even less than that. It's 1920 by 1080 HD, and that's how most television broadcasts. That's what it is. The reality is, even at 8-bit, with the advantage of having the extra channel of green, I think this camera has excellent resolution. I can't imagine wanting any more. Certainly the actresses that I wind up shooting are over 50 are going to give me a hard time already with this resolution, and I'm going to have to put some diffusion on there occasionally to kind of take it back. 4K may come eventually, but it comes at a price. It comes at a price in the amount of data flow that needs to be handled, and it quadruples. Let's be frank about that. It doesn't just go from doubles, it quadruples.
Yeah.
Right now, this camera with a 3.5-hour battery life on a camera that's living inside this body will record on 2 flash cards, and I think you can have 3.5 hours of recording, right?
You can
On the card.
Yeah, you can have
before the battery
put some
goes
64
down.
gigs in
You
there,
shoot documentaries with it, long interviews, whatever. It's crazy stuff. And then the actual data file on that is only maybe 128 gig, right? That's it.
Yeah.
For 3 hours of recording, probably.
It's
close to.
it's not big at all.
So for you, lack of 4K, not really an issue, to be honest.
I don't think it's an issue.
Well,
I can appreciate that people might want 4K for features,
Yeah.
big
But
budget
what we were
features.
talking
but
about earlier, even features, when you view it in a theater, you're still only seeing it at usually a 2K
you are,
image.
but or less. But I think gradually, because of 3D, that 4K projectors will show up more and more in cinemas, so you will be able to screen at 4K. Does it make a difference visually? Yes, there's a little bit more snappiness there and so on. Does it make a difference in the way I perceive the performances or the level of involvement in the movie? I don't think so. I mean, 3D is one of those kind of things, and it stands in the way for me enjoying the movie. I can't get up the glasses and delve into the movie and disappear in the movie. It gets in the way. And 4K for me, if it's too sharp and there's too much information, I don't think that's contributing to the telling of the story.
Okay. It's another thing that has been raised is this whole 8-bit versus 10-bit. Obviously, technically, 10-bit does deliver more detail. But we were talking about this earlier and we're saying, well, that's if it's coming straight off the chip. But this has got... it's recording separate channels from a 4K chip. So what does that mean? I mean, do you think 8-bit is going to be massively disadvantaged over 10-bit with this camera?
I don't know. Every magazine you read that was printed in the world is 8-bit. We're printing the whole industry in Photoshop, and everything we do, it can be processed at 16 and 32, but it's printed at 8.
Yeah.
Are we dissatisfied with the way our magazines look? God, no. They're way too sharp as far as I'm concerned. It's outrageous how good they look. So I don't think the 8-bit thing is an issue. I really don't. And anyhow, the difference between 8 and 10 that you can actually see, you have to get instruments out to measure it, I think perhaps on a big screen. I mean, I saw the footage, Vincent's movie, Mobius, and XXIT from Sam on this big screen at Paramount. I had no problem with it. It looked as good as any feature I'd ever seen on a similar size screen. I think it's interesting that they've very carefully analyzed what the market needs, and Canon have come up with a product which suits that market. The F3 is a great camera from Sony, no question. But physically, when you look at this alongside the F3, you're not going to lug the F3 around. Forget about it. They both do log C, essentially. They both have a similar kind of storage. I think this has more color information than the Sony, which I think is very smart. And I think they do an amazing job, and it's attested to by Sam when he's talking about the green screen, how well it cut the green screens for all of the green screen work that they did on XXIT. That extra layer of green is huge for the compositing folk. And so I don't think you need 444 for that reason, because the mats that are being cut by them at 422 was so good, they had no problem getting away with that. And so I think the camera does everything we'd hoped it would do. And I think it's a testament to the engineers and the management at Sony that they actually asked the professionals. Because I remember 2 years ago being dragged into a room. Shane and I did it together because we got our times mixed up. And we sat there for an hour and told them what we thought the camera should become. And I can't see anything here that we didn't talk about.
So you feel that Canon really listened to you?
Oh,
Whoa.
We're running out of battery now.
batteries
We
now.
need to get a fresh one. I'm just going to charge my glasses again while Lana's going to change the battery. We've got 2 more questions.
Oh yeah, okay.
This is good stuff.
All right,
This is
cool.
good.